Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Arski. I'm one of the consultants with the CART Consortia, and welcome back for those of you who were with me not that long ago as we kind of reviewed the opening documents, what we kind of called the key documents, and now we're getting ready to head back into the classroom and get warmed up for grade 3 math. So welcome to those returning, welcome to those who are just joining us for the first time. And if you have not yet looked at those documents, I'm going to just touch on a quick review so that enough of it will make sense to you as I go through the session with you today. But I would encourage you at the end of it to take some time to go to the website and download the 3 documents that you're going to need if you're going to use them. There's no requirement to use them. But just if you're planning to follow along with that, then I would suggest going to get those and then just having them available whenever we're doing our sessions, but also for yourself as you're trying to get your planning done. So we are going to start on our venture into September, October. The whole idea behind our documents was to try and chunk out some of the work that we do and not to overwhelm ourselves with too much information at one time. And that's kind of the purpose of today as well. I'd like to begin with our land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history may have forgotten. But before we start, I want you just to pause and think for a minute, jot down if you prefer. You don't have to share it in the chat or anything like that. It's just for you. I want you to think about when you normally start grade 3, what are your typical things that you're looking for at the beginning of the year with students? What's your typical routine look like when it comes to math? Just jot it down, regardless of what this curriculum is. Just, where are your starting points generally? And if you're brand new to grade 3, what do you think your starting point should be, would be the next question. And remember, at any time, you can always pause the recording to just give yourself more time to respond to any questions that I put forward. The reason I'm asking this is not because there's a right or a wrong answer to it, but there has been some angst from grade 3 teachers saying, I can't do it all. Like, there's no way I'll get it all done. And I think part of it comes from the focus of the number 100,000, especially right up front. And I wanted just to assure you that, remember, we are looking at a whole year. We aren't going to be teaching the whole year in September, October. So we're not going to tackle 100,000. We're not going to tackle every outcome. We're going to do it in manageable chunks, look at small baby steps into each area. And as primary teachers do exceptionally well, is you're always revisiting and you're always tooling up the next step to move us closer to that outcome. And that's not going to be any different. So let's not think about the fact that you are trying to plan for a year. You're really not going to be teaching a whole year in the next week or the next month. You are going to be moving your students towards assessing their outcome at the end of the year. So we have time to unpack and bridge information in small manageable chunks. Okay, let's move forward then. So what I want to do is just start with a quick review of the documents. I'd like to look at the concept and verbs, which I probably am going to revisit again. I'm going to just touch on taking inventory and what I mean by that, so that you have a good sense of where you're at with the outcomes that are coming up in the immediate moment in time. What do I have for tools that meet that? What do I typically use in lesson plans that will use that already? What do I need? What are some holes and gaps that I might need to fill? And then just looking at some ideas about maybe using money, maybe using approaches that we're going to have to look at for focuses. And I can kind of unpack a little bit about sort of the momentum that we've got going right now. Okay, let's look at our document overview. So before we even look at those 3 key documents, let's make sure that we're all talking the same language and that we all understand the same ideas surrounding our curriculum and what are the terminology that goes with that. So to begin with, we have organizing ideas, and those are replacing our strands that we used to have in MAP. So instead of having a number strand, we have an organizing idea called number. And I can find which organizing idea I'm working on simply by finding the organizing idea in the curriculum document, and the first word behind it will tell you which idea it is that we're working on. That organizing idea is really a big statement, and it should span a number of grades. Your very first organizing idea spans kindergarten to grade 6. So all 7 grades under the same umbrella of that one organizing idea. How we unpack that organizing idea will determine or be determined by the outcome that sits in our particular grade. So we will narrow that general big rock that sits up there down and make it into a manageable chunk for our grade to understand. The guiding question is really a statement or a question for the teacher to read and think about in light of the outcome that I have to teach, in light of the organizing idea and the big rock that sits up there. How would I answer this question that will help move me and what I'm going to do with the students forward in order to meet the learner outcome that we're going to be tackling? So it's really a reflective, should give you some sense about what you might need to think about as you move forward with your planning. The learning outcome is in fact the learning outcome. That's the one familiar one that we know for sure, and it's one that we report on. That's our goal that we want our students to be able to attain by the end of the year. And let's remember, it's the end of the year. We're not assessing it in September and saying not meeting or meeting. We are working our way through the year to meet that outcome. Knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, often called the cusps by the first letter of each word, are those specific detailed parts that will help as I teach the students that particular cusp and we work our way through. It helps to build the foundation of that learner outcome that we're trying to achieve. So a learner outcome could have multiple cusps below it, or just one. It just really depends on the grade and really depends on what it is that that outcome is measuring. We also have literacy, numeracy, and the competency. So the numeracy and literacy progressions have been updated slightly in the wording, but really the intent of them is still the same. And we would expect those to be considered in each unit that's being planned, as would we with the 8 competencies. So you'd find the competency that is best reflective of the work that you're asking the students to do. And you might embed that one then as also a teaching tool into your unit. Over the year, we want every student to meet every competency as they start in September and make their way in June, so that they find themselves in it, they understand it, they can see how well they do in it or what their weaknesses are. They should be able to self-assess in it. So those are still there, and we definitely don't want to lose sight of them. Okay, let's look at our first document, and that is what we call the numbered outcomes document. So the document itself should look familiar to you. It's the familiar math orangish brown color that we get when we look at the printable curriculum from New Learn Alberta. The darkest line at the top houses the organizing idea, and that's true of any of the curriculums. The darkest line at the top is always your organizing idea. Remember, I said the first word behind it will tell you what that idea is. In this case, it's number. So as we move through, I have my grades, and below that, I will get more refined as I have my guiding question, and even more specific as I get my learner outcome. And then I see this row of cusps: knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. So given that this is my outcome, students interpret place value within 100,000. Here's my first row of items that the students have to be able to make their way through, but it also helps to support my end goal of working within 100,000. Now, you might notice in here that it looks all the same, except that there's numbering put in here. And that is not at the new Learn Alberta site. We actually did that in Zone 4 as we were working through with groups of teachers and we were having conversations. We were finding it hard to say, what row are you on again? Like, which cusp are you on? It wasn't so easy to find, and we spent some time going through and just counting rows down or pages and whatever. So we just finally said, let's just number these. We won't change anything that's in the document. We'll just number them so that it's easy for us to access them. And when we're talking about it, then we can just say, hey, I'm on 3N1. And so everybody would be on the same one. And it's just an easy way to go in. So how does this numbering convention work? The first number is your grade. The second number is, in this case, N, which stands for the organizing idea I'm working in, which is number. And I'll show you where the other letters are in the next document. The number behind the first letter, in this case, it's a 1, says this is the very first learner outcome as it appears in this government document. It was okay to number this document because I knew they wouldn't change this document. The order of this doesn't move around. The order of this one is fixed. You as a teacher can organize it differently, and you can choose to teach it in whatever order you want. But from a government perspective, this document was fixed. And that was why one of the reasons that we could go in and number it, knowing that they wouldn't move. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be edits, and that might change the numbering a little bit, but that's okay. That's a minor fix. So if there is a number 1, that tells you it's the first learner outcome. And here's your first one, 3N1, students interpret place value to 100,000. Now up here in the legend, you see that there's a decimal. Your first one didn't have a decimal. The decimal simply tells you that there was more than one row of these cusps underneath each learner outcome. Because remember, the learner outcomes never changes its wording. It's always the same for that outcome. Doesn't matter how many rows of cusps I have underneath, the wording of the outcome never changes. But in this case, it's just 3N1 because this is telling you that that particular outcome, the way it's worded, has this knowledge, understanding, skills, and processes, and that's the only set that works with that particular learner outcome. When I go to another page, I have to find one. Let me see if I have one over here. No, grade 4 doesn't have one either. It's 3N1, so that tells them the same. It's just one learner outcome with one row. But let's go to algebra for grade 3. Here I see algebra A. How do I know? Organizing idea, algebra. And I see a 1.1, which tells me that this is the first learner outcome in algebra. Students illustrate equality with equations. And I have it a set of cusps right here, the knowledge, understanding, skills, and processes. But now I have the repeated learner outcome again, and I have a new set of cusps. So this is where the numbering changes from 1.1 to 1.2, and put in an extra brown bar here so it's easy to find. So if I say to you, I'm on 3A1.2, then you just need to scan down by algebra, find A1.2, and there you go. So it should facilitate easier conversation with your grade partners or partners from another school, if that's what you're working with, to make it a little bit easier to navigate. Just a couple of other things with the document here. We want to clean up some terminology, want to clarify the word including or include. If that shows up in one of your statements, whether it's knowledge, skills and procedures, could be an understanding. In this case, when that word shows up, whatever is behind the word is a required piece to teach. In other words, if the word compare and contrast was there, I need to teach compare and contrast. You have examples over here, so you can see where that looks like. Where I have a little bit more flexibility is where the word such as comes in. Where the word such as is usually words that are attached to it or an example is attached to it. And again, you could look at the words that they're suggesting to unpack something, and you might say, I actually do those words. That's what I do. And that's fine. That's great. You can use them. You can add to them. The same thing with the include. I have to have that required content in there, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing I teach. I can add something else in. So with both include and such as, I can still add additional pieces to the teaching. But with such as, if it does not work, if that's not terminology that would resonate with my students, if the example just does not fit culturally, or I'm in a small town, it's a big city kind of an example, if there was such a thing, you might just want to create your own example. You might want to use the example that's there and create another one of your own anyway. So you've got lots of possibilities when it comes to such as. And then lastly, we have some places, not in every grade, but in some places we find that we have words in brackets. And those words in brackets are math terms that we do need to teach. But because of the age of the student, we might find that those words are a little bit much for them to handle repetitively. So in other words, if I was talking about a question and it was always about translations, different kinds of slides, if I just said translation, translation, translations, translations, it might be just a little much for a grade 3 student. So I might flip the word slide in place of the word translation for a bit of the conversation, just to make it a little bit more age appropriate for them and a little bit more user friendly. That means they still have to learn the words, but I just don't need to use them all the time. The other one is the verbs that are located in your skill sections. I kind of call those the skill concepts or concepts of skill, because we need to make sure that students know what they mean. They have to be exposed to them, and that's part of the assessment that we're doing as well. So we have to be careful that we don't pigeonhole a single verb or skill by one definition, because the content and context in which the word is present will also depend on determine how I'm going to unpack it. So in here, children interpret composition of quantities with intent. That means I could compose, decompose, I could identify, I could soothize. So those are all pieces that might be examples of how I'm going to create quantities or compositions of quantities to 10. Whereas when I look over here, students interpret shape in 2 and 3 dimensions. Again, interpret, meaning what am I seeing outside? How am I interpreting that? How many sides does it have? Is it round? Is it square? So what are the pieces that I see? How can I build it? How can I take it apart, compose, decompose, etc.? It all will determine on the context of the use of the verb. Your second document is the comparison document. So the curriculum comparison document is just by the name of it. It compares old curriculum that we left 2007 to new curriculum that we have implemented now. So down the left-hand side, you see the familiar terminology of number strand. You'll see the outcomes, as you're probably also familiar to. And on the right-hand side, those next 3 columns are the new curriculum. So in this part of the curriculum, what we're looking for, or this part of the document, we're looking to see, of the old ones, is there a place that we basically have just moved it over into the new curriculum? And if so, where does that exist? And if so, are there any additions or changes? Is it clear that it really is the same thing, etc.? So in your very first learner outcome, where we see specific outcome number 1, you see nothing to the right-hand side, which means that that outcome no longer exists in grade 3. Now, it could have been moved to grade 2, could have been moved to grade 1, it could have been moved up, or it's just gone. So when I look at this document, that's how I interpret the empty space here. When I go down to outcomes 2, 3, 4, and 5, I see that they fit into an understanding that had 3 bullets on it. I see that the knowledge describes it well. And then there's a few newer pieces of terminology that show up over on the skill side. But all in all, the intent of all of these old outcomes is very similar to the intent of what we're seeing here. So I'm only going to highlight things in yellow that are really uniquely different. Everything else, since the intent is really the same end product that we had before, we don't highlight it just because the words don't purposely exactly match. What we're just really looking for is the intent there. And if it is, that's great. And if there's a change, that's what you see highlighted in yellow. So most of the outcome is there, but there are some newer pieces, like 100,000 is a new piece. The terminology of natural number is a new piece. So anything that's highlighted in yellow is new. If you look at the top here, you also see the short forms for each of the ideas. So statistics ST, geometry G, and the color that they are. So you'll notice that number strand is kind of a red number, the red N, sitting on a pinkish red background. Any outcome that is a number related outcome will house that color. So it makes it also very easy to see where number goes. I see it again, I see it again, and so on, right? So if it was now moving into, let's say, measurement, these colors would now be a magenta color, and all of the outcomes would have an M in them. So we were just looking at the sample ones for number. So if you haven't downloaded that document, I would download both the numbered outcomes document and this curriculum comparison document onto 11 by 17 paper. I would make this one colorful in color because you need the color. That's really what this is based on, is color, to identify changes, to see what goes together. The numbered outcomes document should be on 11 by 17, but does not have to be in color. There's no real benefit to doing that. So you're going to watch for these colors to show up in your curriculum comparison document. And now we're going to move to the last one, which is our year at a glance. So our year at a glance, if you notice, I'm seeing the colors coming up again that I just showed you up here. And that's why I said color now becomes significant. The year at a glance is a suggestive document. It is not a mandated, it is not a you have to follow it to a T. You could be doing parts of it, you can be doing all of it, you can be doing some of it, you can be doing none of it. Depends on where you're at and what you want, how you structured your courses in your class. But again, when we built this with teachers, we built it knowing what the outcomes were, but we also knew that we had to bridge. And so the things that you're seeing in yellow are the suggested targets as you're starting to bridge and move forward. And you may find these too fast. I would venture to say, when we come back in October, that we might want to change that to 100 to 500. Maybe everyone will be there, but I'm not sure that we will be. So that's a good example of nothing's written in stone. If you need to change it, you change it. If your kids are exceeding 100 and you were in September, then move on. There's nothing, again, written in stone. If they're only at 20, you're not going to 100 yet, right? You're going to meet them at 20. So you do whatever you need to do to keep them at that level. We also say bridging to 100 with money. So we are deliberately using money as a concept that needs to be learned because of financial literacy, but we're also using it as a tool to really build up the foundations of place value and understanding, and especially of money. That's another piece that we really wanted to make quite strong. So what you're seeing then, what you're seeing then is a month of September, a month of October, and 3N1 and 3N2 are really the focus. So remember I said you're not covering the whole world in September. You're not knocking anything off and saying done, done, done. It's not a one and done. It's a slow progression, and keep revisiting and revisiting and checking for mastery. And the minute I can start showing you I consistently can do something, then we bump up that number and start changing our target. And as we keep revisiting the different components of the outcome, we also start to build mastery in the students in learning how to identify that they're moving forward. So that's another component of this as well. We also have algebra in here. So we're going to leverage money and use that to maybe start off with 20 to 100 with money. We want to represent two expressions on the same side. So show me two ways to show $10. Left side, right side, 2 5s, a 4, and 6, right? I can do a simple expression. I don't need to big numbers, just make it small, manageable. And we just start to manage our way through. We're using these all at the same time. We're not doing just the number. We're going to be taking money out. We're going to be doing some of the work with that. And maybe we don't even talk about place value right off the bat. When we do, we talk about it in terms of money, right? How many 10s are there? How many 1s are there? That type of thing. This layout may seem familiar to you. It comes from Edmonton Public's template that they used when we were online and having to teach at home for COVID. They had so graciously shared out all of their modules and their scope and sequence that they called it. And that scope and sequence resonated very easily for teachers. It was easy for them to pick up, easy for them to sort of navigate through. And so I've stolen the skeleton of it, but what you're seeing on the inside, of course, is specific to the new curriculum. And it just seems that people are able to follow this fairly quickly. Notice everything here is numbered because it's in that pinkish red. Algebra has that off-white or brownish color. We see blue patterning starting, and we see time going on. And again, time, they said, could you make both time and patterning ongoing, because we're just going to keep revisiting it. We're going to keep adding to it. And in this case, because we're using money, the more proficient I become with money, the higher levels I can go with the sequencing, the higher levels I can go with the skip counting, let's say on a clock, to use that to leverage it. We're not going to worry about fractions right off the bat. We just really want to get a good foundation. So this is where we would talk about taking inventory. What I'm showing you is just the months of September, October, because we try to just limit it to 2 months at a time, just to make it more manageable. And what we've got here are some suggestions in yellow. We've got our 2 outcomes. You could add another one in if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You have algebra at the bottom. And so your next step would be to look at each one of those number ones. Here's the outcome. Now here's all the knowledge, understanding, skills, and processes that go with that. Where are we at? What are we working on with them and with any group, or what are we going to be working on with the students? What do I have already that I could embed money into, or how would I unpack some of these with money? So you have space. You can just simply jot these down on your own. You could pause the video right now if you're working with somebody. But we've also given you some lists that teachers have made over time. So as we talk with groups of teachers, we ask them, how would you leverage money into this? What are some things that you might do? And so you're seeing some suggested ideas on the side. Again, it doesn't have to be the way you do it. You could do it completely differently and still achieve exactly the same outcome. So you have a section for notes, you have some ideas or some prompting questions that go through the unpacking and sort of the inventory check of what do I have for 3 and 2. Got to make sure I have what I'm looking for to unpack it with that group of students. Algebra, same thing. What are some things for algebra that I could consider? So gave an example there. We might want to leave base 10 blocks for a while. Let them become really proficient in money. We can use money for exchange and converting. We can use money to talk about ones and tens and hundreds. All of that could be done with money, and it would give a context to us when we bring out these base 10 blocks again. Up until then, it's really a block, and you told me that 10 of those makes one of these that you called a rod, got it, and 10 of those rods make a flat, got it. But that doesn't mean they have any connection to the real world with those, whereas money would offer us that. So again, patterns, time, statistics. You could do statistics outside of math. You could achieve all of the outcomes in statistics with a science or with a social project. But in any case, here's some suggestions for patterning that may or may not be helpful. We've left some space here for you to do some of the work on time, but again, you're doing cycles and duration, so it depends on where you're going to integrate that. Usually with agenda time, that's a good one. But what I also wanted to spend some time on is showing you the financial literacy, because the financial literacy, remember, is the reason that we're really saying we're going to leverage money, not just for them to learn money, but also to enhance our math program again. We kind of lost it in the past, and we could bring it back. It wouldn't be a bad thing. We're not foregoing anything because we do. We're just simply bringing it back as a manipulative while we learn it as a concept. So in a perfect world, if grade 1s had arrived at your door knowing all of the money related things already, I wouldn't have to worry about who knows money and who doesn't. But right now, you're going to have to assume that this is the grade 1 stuff. They probably don't know it. So visit the kindergarten grade 1 teachers, get some of the resources that we've suggested for them, and just do a couple of days of learning how to do the money. They're going to catch on quickly in grade 3, and they absolutely love the fact that they're dealing with money. This is what's happening in grade 2. So again, I've left notes here for you to go through. And then here is our grade 3. And that gives you a chance to, again, go through and have a look at what is it exactly in grade 3 that I need to be responsible for. As far as talking about money, I can't really talk about buying needed items. I can't really talk about what's affordable in making purchases, needs and wants, financial goals, until I understand money. And it's got to be beyond just memorizing what's a toonie, what's a loonie. I need to understand what that means. I understand what that coin is and how much it's worth, and how can I leverage trading in the world of money instead of in the world of base 10 blocks. Okay, so to start off with, so money might be new to you right now. Maybe you've already heard people are leveraging that right now to get started. One of the things that I have done is I've gone into kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. I've gone all the way up to grade 6, and I'm looking at what are your outcomes, what are statements and the knowledge, skills, all of those pieces. I'm not copy and pasting the whole thing, otherwise it'll be pages long, and already is long. But here's what you see sort of the big rocks or the big areas are that we're working on in kindergarten. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that I can do with money. Now, that doesn't mean I'm only going to do them with money, but I can absolutely knock off quite a few of my outcomes using money right off the bat. And so I get used to them seeing money, converting money, taking the money and counters as just as counters. I don't know the coins, but I do know 5. So you might say find 5 of the same thing. I don't know the coins yet. As I start knowing the coins, I might say, could you find me 5 dimes or 5 nickels or whatever that coin is that we're working on. Grade 1, you already see there's skip counting that's coming into play here. There's quite a bit in grade 1 that can be done with money, as there is in grade 2. We are going to use money for unit fractions, but we're not going to talk about 1/2s and 1/4s right off the bat. We want to talk about it in terms of a relationship, and money is an easy one to do that. We can teach them how to make unit fractions, etc. Grade 3, it gets quite long. There's quite a bit that we can do with money. Anything that's in the brown colored, anything that's not white, basically, allows me to use money to work in that outcome. So my point is, in making it a tool that we want to use, you can't really park yourself for a week or 2 weeks just teaching money. That's not going to work. I can teach money, I can count, I can represent, I can find attributes of the money. And if I don't know it, I can still build you an array that's 4 by 3 using the same coin. And if that's my direction from you. So you learn it as you go, and they do learn it fairly quickly because it's quite exciting to them to have that opportunity with money. You'll see in the green that I also have highlighted in there, and that means that yes, money is still part of it, but in this case, the money will lead the fraction work that we're going to start with. And so we're going to use money to decompose fractions into unit fractions and vice versa. So you might be thinking, oh, okay, I would like to start with money, but I don't have any. We need to order some. There is a really neat app. It's right here. I'm going to stick it into the chat box so that you have it. We have to remember that money in Canada is colorful. It is not black and white. It's not a rectangular box with a 10 written in it. So we have to make sure that it looks authentic. Okay, it's in the chat box. You can grab it. So this is a great app. It allows you to pull it. So if you're just testing to see whether they know the coins, you could say, pull me out 2 nickels. So if I know the nickels, I'm going to pull out 2 nickels. You might say, pull out 3 loonies. And so they go get 3 loonies and so on. The faces, the attributes of the coins, the value, the color of the bills, all of those are parts of Canadian money, and we have to really guard that students get to see it in this context, not in a black and white context. You can increase the number that they pull out. So here you go up to 10, which means I can grab 100 and just pull that out. So it's a wonderful little tool. I hope you can use it. I hope it'll be helpful. You can certainly give it to the students as well, and they can be working on it. So let's have a look at some specifics here. First of all, I did include for you 3 different videos. If you've never actually watched anything about our money, have the kids watch with you. The best one is probably down at the bottom, Canada's New Banknotes, but all of these are excellent, and I would encourage you to watch them. Okay, we just got to get past, there we go. So that's a nice kickoff. If you haven't used money yet and you want to get them introduced to it, the bottom one tells you some pretty neat little things that are about our bills that most people don't even realize. And I won't spill the beans, so you'll have to watch that 4-minute video so that you can see it. But how do I get started? It could be something as simple as put a bunch of coins, including bills. I even throw in some geometric shapes into a bag, ice cream pail, whatever, and have the students just empty it on the floor and just walk around with the instruction. Can you clean it up so it's easier to see? Okay, that's an easy instruction. Anybody can do it. Doesn't matter whether I know money or not. Just can you clean it up so it's easier to see? So when they scatter them out, you'll see, you know, all over the place like this. You might be asking, why is there a penny in here? The penny is not in our pocket anymore because we don't make the penny. We don't make it, but we still use it. There is not a single calculation that happens at a restaurant, at your morning coffee stop, at the bank, at the gas station, that does not go to pennies. So although we don't carry them in our pocket, we are still aggressively adding them on a day-by-day basis and subtracting them and debiting them from our accounts. We go by the exact cent. So we still have them in the world. And I think that's part of the problem that we're seeing with the frustration of not understanding place value. When the penny went away, we looked for alternatives, and the base 10 blocks were a good alternative because they had a unit in them. But they're very abstract. If you think about it for a second, how did you introduce it? This is a unit. I need 10 of those units to make a rod. How can you prove that? Well, I can line them up. I need 10 rods to make a flat. The flat is 100. But that's all it is plastic. And yes, I can teach them how to make the number 126. I can teach them to make 554. But it's just in terms of plastic in an abstract. And I may or may not be able to shift that when you start changing it to decimals. If I started with money first, if I understood that I could trade 5 pennies to make a nickel, 2 nickels to make a dime, the idea of conversion is still there and trading. But now you have a context. They have a meaning to do that. I don't have to walk around with all those coins if I can convert them to a higher denomination. So now we have meaning for that whole process. So if we started with money first and then went back to base 10 blocks, that whole notion of conversion has some value to them now. And if I get stuck with the base 10 blocks, I can always and will, students will revert back to money. They'll just put it in terms of money in their heads and say, okay, this is like my loonie, I'm going to trade it in, I get a $10 bill. That's exactly how they think. So when I scatter this around in grade 3, I might not know any of these coins at all. You're going to have to treat them like kindergarten. Don't make assumptions. Notice I said just clean it up so it looks better. I didn't say sort them. I didn't say put all the gold ones together. I didn't say put all the toonies together. I didn't say anything like that. Because what I want to do is walk around and see what they do. And typically they put things that look together, the same together. And you can walk around and say, what can you tell me about these? And they might say, those are all toonies. Okay, how do you know they're toonies? Well, first of all, they're gold and silver, right? They'll tell you there's 2 different colors. It says $2 on them. I know that that's a toonie. It has a polar bear. You equally can go around to a group in grade 3 and they'll group these together and say, why are these together? Because they look the same. What else do you know about them? Nothing. They don't know the name, don't know the value. You cannot assume right now that children know money. And this would be the kind of conversation right up to grade 6. Grade 6s don't know it either. So we need to be patient, but it doesn't mean you put on the brakes for 2 weeks. I can still bring this out, and on the first day, I can say, can you show me 8 of the same thing? What am I showing? What am I looking for? 8. What am I looking for? Same thing. If somebody knows that they're toonies, you could say, what is the value of a toonie? $2. If I have 4 of them, can you skip count by 2s? Let's reiterate what they should have come to you with already, a strong skip counting. So 2, 4, 6, 8, right? So I can start unpacking a ton of things as I start unpacking the money at the same time. The word coin may be foreign to them, and that's one you may have to test out and see if they even know what it means. Not a lot of students have heard it. It's not one that's readily jumped on when you ask, what are some other ways to describe this? They'll say toonie. Okay, what else? It's the biggest one. What else? If I have a $20 bill and then I have this, some students will say that's a coin, but not a lot. So remember that in kindergarten, they would have arrived in kindergarten going to grade 1, knowing all the attributes, the colors, the value. Grade 1, they're already using them for addition in the denominations. They're always already doing them for skip counting. So we have a little bit of work to get caught up on. There is a resource down here. It's a Teacher Pay Teacher. She's done a phenomenal job of hitting the mark exactly for what we need when it comes to the money identification. Again, you don't need every bit of the slides because your students may know them, but it goes from identification of coins to matching them to their names, to organizing them from greatest to least, to less than, greater than. I've just given you a couple of screenshots here. I can't show you all of them. To a piggy bank, right? And if I've never done money before, leave alone a piggy bank, this is going to be pretty foreign. But one of the questions we ask is, which piggy bank do you want? And we have them work in pairs, and usually they'll say A. And we celebrate that and say, good job. But one of the things I would say is, tell me why. And often what you'll hear is, I chose A because it has 4 things in it and B only has 1. So right answer, wrong reason. They're not understanding how much money is in here. They don't understand that they have more money. They just understand there's more of something. There's 4 of something in here and only 1 of something in here. So always ask them to explain what their thinking is, especially with money, so that you're clear that they know exactly what it is they're doing. Subitizing is another one that would be helpful. It is not about just kindergarten and grade 1. Subitizing helps with math facts, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. If every student got their own set of subitizing cards, we could use that for war, turn them over. Each one turns over a card. Whoever calls off the highest number between the 2 wins the pair. Whoever can add the 2 together correctly gets the pair. Whoever multiplies them together when you get to that point. This is a great way to engage kids. It's fun, but they're learning right alongside. We don't want to have to see them in grade 3 count. We should subitize this. They should see 5. Once they understand the money, then they should also know that 5 pennies could be a nickel. And then I can leverage that. If I pull them out on that math app or the money app that I showed you, I could pull out 2 groups of 5. Some students will say 5, 10. Some will say 5 plus 5 is 10. Some will say, I see 10 right off the bat. And some will go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Whenever you build an array with money, whether it's dimes, nickels, whatever you have, it doesn't really matter. I want them to be able to subitize the rows, and whether they see 2 5s, a 10, also skip count along the way, just all of that happening in one quick sort of flash on the screen of lessons. Let's skip count together. What do we see? We see 5 and 5 is 10. What could we put here? Could be a nickel, could be another nickel. What else could we do? So if they've gone to the point where they now know that those 2 are a dime, great. If they haven't, then we wouldn't do that. I see it again. I see 5 again. So I see 5, I see 10, I see 15, I see 20, I see 25. I can skip count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, except that when I get down to the bottom, I have 1 left over. Odd, even. Now I can model odd, even. So Again, this could be a nickel all the way down. It could be 25 cents for the whole page. But leverage these arrays for everything that they're worth. So as they start coming up, even with the 10, I can go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, but I can also say 2 groups of 2. I can see it is 4, even if they count. 3 groups of 2 is 6. 4 groups of 2 is 8. So what am I doing? I'm not talking to them about multiplication facts, but I'm creating arrays for them to start getting pictures in their minds of what multiplication facts actually are. The more they do this, when you bring out multiplication facts to introduce it to them formally, it becomes an absolute breeze to them. So again, I can go 2 by 2, 3 by 2. I could go 3 by 3. I could go 2 by 3, right? Ask them to figure out all of them. They could take a pencil crayon. This is on paper, and they could mark off all the 2s. They could do the 3s. They can write the total in between. It's just doing it over and over. And if you start them right at the beginning, they get so used to doing it, they don't even question it anymore. And they're learning their math facts. So some might see 2 groups of 10 and a 5. There's 2 10s and a 5. Some will just say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. It's a quarter. Here's your 100. And this is your goal for grade 3. But if I can skip count by 10 and start there, I have got lots of skip counting by 2s that I can do. I can go 10, 20, 30. I can go skip counting by 20s, which is grade 2. So again, you have so many different things you can do with just this one array of dollars, or pennies, I should say. We're going to leverage this picture, not right away, but we will probably do that more towards the end of, as we move into November, December. We'll unpack unit fractions. We'll do it with money. This will become our starting point. This is another slide deck that's in your folder. Again, you can change this number to whatever you want. It can be 85 cents. It could be $250. In this case, what they're doing is going to be counting out money, and they have to show you whatever number you put up here 4 different ways. So again, whatever order I put numbers in, the addition doesn't matter because the sum will still be the same. You could say that one of these should be efficient. In other words, what's the least number of coins or bills to get to that amount of money? I could put dimes on a number line. Like, don't just ignore the number lines. I can put cent signs behind them and just line up the dimes. Again, it gives me a visual that I need 10 of those to get to 100. The group that I was working with last year in grade 3, the teacher had said after Christmas, it would have been nice for us to have had a kit for the students so that we wouldn't have to keep pulling out the money all the time and all the different stuff that we were doing with them. So as of February on, we started to make a list of all the things that we were using on a regular basis and things that might be useful that we hadn't used yet because we hadn't unpacked all of the new curriculum. So she wanted a kit that each student could have that could fit in their desk or into their cubby hole, but we didn't want it to be a monster. So everything you're seeing here is in the kit. I'm not going to go through it all. There is a recording on the website. If you go into additional resources where the kits are, you'll find a slide deck. You'll find everything below the recording is also anything that was created that needs to be photocopied or run off is all in there as well. This is what we put in for their money bag. This is what each student had that they could work from. And in actual fact, it worked well for pairs as well. But if you ask them a strategic question, they might run out. They have to come back to the banker, which would be the teacher, and they have to collect what they need. Because we're also moving to 100,000, we were trying to really make sure that teacher or students would have a sense of what does that look like? Because that's a pretty big leap from where we were. So in grade 2, we created 1,000 by taking cash register tape, running it down the hallway, taking 10 meter sticks and marking them off from 0 to 100 or 1 meter to 100. I did every 10 and marked off each one in between. You'll see I've marked it on 20 centimeters, but I also put 20 cents above it. So at the end of this, we would have had 1,000, right? So that would have given me a place to go. So I'd have 100 centimeters, 200 centimeters, 300 centimeters, keep going, I get to 1,000. Then what we said is, all right, for each one of these meters that we marked on here, let's change it. Let's call each one of those meters the equivalent of 1,000. And the goal was to get them to the end, which would show them what 10,000 would look like. Or we start here and make it 10,000 going up to 1,000,000. So, or 100,000, sorry, which means that really we're giving them a sense, but we also want to use these number lines for benchmarking. You could do place value. We just got some common dice that we created from wooden blocks that came out of Dollarama. Again, these are explained in the video, so I won't worry about that now. And these are your templates again, where I can start small and then work big. All right, so when I look at these templates, there's one for every different denomination. You can go right up to a $100 bill. The title of them tells you what coin is on the template. So you don't have to create them, they're already done. But they're also done in Word form, so you can edit if you have a specific denomination or way you'd like to see it go, that's fine too. Okay, Toskino up north also indigenized the 2007 curriculum. And it's still very relevant to what we're doing now with the new curriculum. So I'd encourage you to take some time to look at that at some point. We will unpack that at a later date. So I'm not going to do it now, but you do have the links down here if you're looking for just to explore. Because you're doing cycles and duration, that would be a great one to use because they've shown basically what outcomes can be taught in each of the seasons. Or we could be talking about duration over a medicine wheel. We can be talking about duration of a winter count. Again, these links will just give you some extra information if it's something that's of interest to you to indigenize or to bring First Nations into your math curriculum. So this is the site that you're going to find all of your materials at. This is where you'll find the recording, the slide decks, and anything else that I posted for you that you might be able to use. Your key documents are there as well, the numbered outcomes, the curriculum comparison, as well as the year at a glance. The kits are under additional resources, so just look for them there. And there'll be drop-down menus for math and French immersion science, and anything else that you're looking for should be right there on the page. So I hope this has been helpful to getting you going. It also helpful to get you to start thinking about, could you leverage, not saying you have to, but could you leverage money to teach your outcomes and get the kids really versed in it while we're waiting to get them learned in it to have those conversations about financial literacy. Thanks very much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful and great start.